Every story you're about to hear is true, and every one of them ends with the same thought. I shouldn't have been there.
What is your most disturbing, scary, or creepy real story?
A few years ago, I was walking through the woods off the beaten track a bit and I smelt this really overpowering sweet smell. Being nosy, I pulled back the undergrowth to have a look and found a dead body. The guy had clearly been there a while and wasn't looking great. All swollen and green and black with various runny bits. The local wildlife had also been dining well for a few days. I called the police, who told me to wait with the body until they arrived. Being in the middle of nowhere, it took a while for them to arrive and it got dark, and I was just sat there in the dark with him for a long time. It turned out he had committed suicide. For a long time afterwards, I had dreams about him and he would talk to me and not nice things. Mainly about how he was angry I had disturbed his resting place and he wanted me to kill myself. Probably just my imagination, but pretty disturbing at the time. He still turns up in my dreams from time to time, and no doubt will be tonight after telling you this. A few summers ago, I went for a bike ride around midnight with a friend. When the night ended, we went our separate ways, and I had about 2 blocks to ride home alone. Because of construction, I had to ride on the sidewalk. The streets were completely quiet, and everything felt normal, until I reached the corner where I needed to turn onto my street. There was a man walking alone ahead of me. He looked to be in his 40s, a bit scruffy, but definitely not homeless. The sidewalk was narrow, and I didn't want to startle him. When I was about 6 feet behind him, I said, "Hey, behind you," to let him know I was there. He turned around and gave me an extremely angry look. I turned onto my street, and he followed me. He started screaming, threatening to hurt me and shouting insults as he chased after me. I live right near that corner, and I didn't want him to realize which house was mine, so I made a quick decision to loop around the block instead. That wasn't the scariest part. When I came back around and looked down the street, I saw him standing on my front stoop, staring out toward the road, as if he somehow knew where I lived. He saw me ride past again, but didn't say anything. I didn't go home that night. I went back to my friend's place instead. 2 days later, my bike was stolen from the alley behind my house. About 2 years ago, I was driving home late at night after a family reunion. The drive was about 2 hours long, and I didn't stay overnight because I had work the next day. Most of the road cut through dense bushes and trees on both sides, the kind of road that feels uncomfortable even during the day. About 45 minutes in, exhaustion hit me suddenly. Not slowly. All at once, I knew I wasn't gonna make it much farther. I kept driving, hoping I'd find somewhere safe to pull over. A rest stop, a gas station, anything. There was nothing. So I made a very bad decision. I pulled off the road onto the grass, behind some bushes, trying to hide my car from passing traffic. Cars still passed every few minutes. I checked the time, 11:22 p.m., and I fell asleep. Sometime later, I woke up to a scratching sound. I checked the clock, 11:50 p.m. The sound stopped after a few seconds. I was still exhausted, so I didn't even look around. I went back to sleep. Then it happened again. The scratching returned, but this time, it didn't stop. I opened my eyes and checked the clock, 12:40 a.m. That's when panic set in. I tried to tell myself it was just an animal, but one question wouldn't leave my mind. Why would it come back nearly an hour later? I slowly looked into my rearview mirror, and just for a moment, I saw something running back into the trees. I didn't wait. I started the car and drove off immediately. Just around the bend, no more than 100 yards ahead, there was another car parked on the side of the road. The driver's door was wide open. I slowed down, just enough to see if anyone was inside. There wasn't. Then I checked my rearview mirror. Nothing. And suddenly a man came sprinting around the corner. He was shouting, yelling for me to stop, demanding that I get out of my car. I didn't think. I didn't hesitate. I sped away as fast as I could. I never saw that man again. Moral of the story: never sleep on the side of a deserted road. When I was a young child, I had the same dream every night for years about drowning when a huge wave swept over me and I sank to the bottom. Years later, I had a temp job delivering mail one summer during college. I saw this old lady sitting on a front porch waiting for me. When I got up there, she looked at me and said in a foreign accent,
"You drowned when Oceania sank beneath the waves."
Freaks me out until this day. My house sits farther back on the lot than most others on the street. The layout is unusual. The sidewalk runs along the length of the living room and ends at the front porch, which opens directly into that room. Large windows that don't open line the living room wall. They let in plenty of light during the day, but at night, they offer no privacy at all. At the time, the rest of my family was away on vacation, and I had the house to myself. I decided to drink heavily that night. I passed out on the living room couch around 9 o'clock. Later, when I woke up briefly, I realized I was too afraid to walk back to my bedroom, so I stayed on the couch, directly beneath those large windows. I woke up suddenly, for no clear reason. I was overwhelmed by chills, the kind that make your whole body tense. I couldn't understand why. Then the banging started. It came from directly above me. I didn't move, but I opened my eyes and looked up at the window. Someone was standing there, pounding on the glass. Without moving, I glanced at the cable box. It was around 3 in the morning. The banging continued. Then it stopped. I stayed completely still. Suddenly it started again, but this time from 2 different directions. Someone was pounding on the window. Another person was banging on the front door. They didn't stop. They didn't leave. This went on for nearly 40 minutes. Then, just as suddenly as it began, everything stopped. It was one of the most terrifying experiences I can remember. After that night, I was constantly on edge. The next day I called a friend and asked if he would come stay with me for the rest of the week. His response was,
"Why? So we can both be murdered in our sleep."
I was 17 and had just gotten my driver's license. Back in high school, my friends and I made it a goal to find abandoned houses where we could throw parties. We had a few decent spots, but the best one was a house I passed every day on my way home from work. It was an unfinished shell of a massive house, sitting on a large property with undeveloped land behind it. I told one of my friends about it, and one evening before going to see a movie, I decided to show it to him. It was summer just around dusk, and I had my headlights on. I pulled into the front of the house, and we were there for no more than 10 seconds before backing out to return to the main road. About a minute later, a large truck pulled up behind us with its high beams on, driving extremely close. We noticed it, but didn't think much of it as we continued toward the main road. When we reached the intersection, Primera turned right, but the truck cut through the gas station on the corner and blocked us in. A huge man stepped out of the truck. My friend and I were absolutely terrified. He knocked on my window, and I slowly rolled it down. What made it even stranger was that this was usually a very busy road. There was no one else around. He asked what we were doing at the house. I quickly lied and said we were just making a turn. He stared at us for a few seconds, then smiled, stepped back, and waved us on. To this day, that house is still unfinished, and I've always felt there was something illegal going on there. When I was about 10, all of my cousins and siblings were over. About 10 of us there. The parents and grandparents were out for an adult dinner, so it was just the kids sitting around watching a few movies, when all of a sudden, the house shook, and there was a large flash coming from the backyard. It felt as if a bomb dropped. We all heard, felt, and saw it, and as a pack, we ran into the hallway. The eldest cousins in the group debated on calling the police, but opted to call the parents. After a few minutes, we gained our courage and ventured out into the living room again, this time with weapons, just in case. After a half hour with no other issues, the parents came home and thought we were insane. There was nothing wrong with the backyard and no neighbors reported anything. It's been 10 years, and we still talk about it, trying to figure out what it was. That has been the scariest thing to happen to me, by far. Okay, so this happened to me last summer when I was back at my parents' house during the holidays. It was around 3 a.m., and I was in my room on my computer when I got a call from my sister. Now that was already a little bit weird since my sister's room is just down the hallway from mine, and she could have just came in my room. I went to pick up, and the call ended as soon as I reached the phone. I figured that she wanted to speak with me, so I got up and went to her room. As soon as I reached her door, she started screaming that someone was in the room with her, so I busted in, and of course, nobody was here. After she stopped crying, she told me that she woke up and saw a dark shadow just centimeters from her face, and that's when she screamed. So I told her that she called me. She told me that her phone was not in her room and that she was sleeping. Sure enough, her phone is in her purse downstairs. The weird part is that I have the log of her call on my phone, but she doesn't. Never managed to explain this one. This isn't supernatural, but it's one of the most disturbing and surreal experiences of my life. One early morning a few years ago, I was walking to my bus stop around 5 a.m., eating a banana. It was dark and misty, and I was half asleep, internally debating something trivial like whether to get my daily Starbucks before or after my commute. As I approached a dimly lit corner on my street, a tall man wearing a black mask stepped out of a dark alley to my left, sleepy and disoriented. I barely registered him. Then he shouted, "Put down your purse," and pointed a gun at my head. That's when everything snapped into focus. He told me to put down my bags. I said, okay. I'm putting them down right here." He ordered me to walk toward him, toward the alley, and get down on the ground. My heart was racing, and my hands still smelled like banana. I knew I needed to get away. I don't know why, but I couldn't stop talking. "Look, I'm on the ground. My stuff is over there. Please, just take it." He didn't like that. He shouted for me to be quiet, climbed on top of me, and pressed the gun to my head. At this point, I should explain that I was on my way to coach a high school practice and was dressed in oversized clothes, baggy pants, hat, jacket. If not for my voice, I could have passed for a teenage boy. As he looked down at me, something seemed to click. I'm convinced he realized I was a woman. He got off me, stood up, and pointed toward the dark alley. "Come with me." My stomach dropped. There had been recent reports of assaults in my neighborhood. When he pointed toward that alley, my instincts kicked in. Every part of me knew I couldn't go down there. I kept talking. "I'm coming. I'm following you," I said, and he believed me. I took 2 tiny steps backward toward the sidewalk. He turned his body and his gun toward the alley. That was my moment. I took a breath, lowered my head, and started sprinting. I ran 6 or 7 blocks before finally stopping, then circled back to my apartment, hoping he hadn't followed me or seen where I lived. The police checked the alley an hour later, but the man was gone. The only evidence left behind was my banana peel slowly browning in the alley. Even now, it still bothers me, but I'm grateful that what haunts me are the what-ifs, not the what happened. My grandmother believed this story until the day she died. It happened during the war in London, when my father was still a baby. After her home was destroyed in a bombing, she went to stay with a friend. The friend gave her a room on the top floor of the house. One night, as she was carrying my father upstairs to put him to bed, a figure suddenly appeared on the staircase. It spoke to her and told her not to sleep in that room that night. Terrified, she went back downstairs and told her friend that she and the baby would be sleeping in the sitting room instead. Her friend was annoyed, but eventually agreed. That same night, a bomb exploded near the house. The roof collapsed directly onto the room upstairs. It crushed the spot where my father's cot had been. If they had slept there, he would not have survived.
Some stories don't end when the lights turn on. Thank you for watching. Stay tuned.